All right, good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending on when you're watching this. We're going to jump into Chapter 5, Feasibility of Operational Employment. And before I do that, I just want to, I mentioned in the previous chapter how I'm always, trying to be skeptical of certain things and just questioning everything no matter how much I would like to believe it or want to believe it. And I have this video up here from Chapter 4. And it's opened up exactly where I was showing the Lolita Express was intercepted during an RV session. And previous to this, previous to me showing you this in the video in Chapter 4, I was discussing how parallel construction was used to create a myriad of various lies and potentially ways to support the program or refute it or hide it or expose it, and just different ways to do it. And it occurred to me as well after just sort of listening to this that another having known that during the 80s and 90s there were also it's been reported that the CIA was themselves responsible for smuggling cocaine and marijuana across the world. It's quite possible that RV sessions themselves in some cases were drafted up in such a way that they were used to hide CIs, which are confidential informants or, snitches, basically. And in order to hide the fact that maybe the NSA or the CIA or the Army or the FBI or somebody was intercepting communications and signals intelligence illegally, what better way to sort of bury that thought, right? And say that, well, we were using the CIA and the NSA's psychic spies, and in fact they were the ones that found it, and without really being able to prove it or disprove it, since so much of the information was classified, with the exception of what's been found in the media itself at that time, or what was being published at that time in the media. I think it's worth adding that in there as just another skeptical sidebar, just something to annotate in the back of your head that it certainly could have been employed. These RV sessions, maybe their downfall or the fact that they went dark after 96, with some still showing up in 2000, I think, 1 and 2002, and some of the declassified documents. But on top of my speculation about technology being used to hinder it among the populace, it's possible that this could have been the program could have been bastardized by these types of programs where the they're capturing their own people doing stuff, so they have to sabotage the program in order to keep that from happening. And also with that, let's just I had mentioned in chapter 4 that a lot of the books that were published during that time would have had to have gone through a security review. And sure enough, here we go. So this is Russell Targ's book, Mind Wars, in which doesn't look like do we have an author? Okay, so in which Joseph W. McMoneagle, project officer of Center Lane, which is another name for another program that was handled later on through the DIA. This is basically their run through of what they've discovered in the book, while reading it. So this shows you that, for better or for worse, whether you might think about Russell Targ or any of these people, they followed their orders and they submitted the book for review. And you can pause the video and look at some of this stuff, but I'll read out A here. Remote viewing RV is real. It is accurate. It is replicable. Is being pursued by at least the CIA, Navy, Army, and Pentagon in general. That it is being pursued for intelligence and military applications. The government's interest in RV is clearly applications oriented. Here we have some other ones. Their key funding support from the CIA, NASA, ARPA, and the military. The NSA uses it, or is using it for code breaking. Testing it for code breaking, rather. So, that should be enough confirmation. whether or not the first 3 minutes that I expounded on an idea for, targeting CIs that work for the agency or are covertly double, whatever, double, triple spies or whatever, that's certainly plausible too, but it doesn't refute the fact that the program is real and the data is real and the actual potential threat for people who can, potentials and talents, which is probably just a term I'll use throughout to reference people as that's a term that has been used in earlier documentation. People with potential being referenced as a pronoun as potentials, or talented or talents. All right, so let's get into chapter 5 here. If you hear some background noise, I apologize. I had to open up the window a little bit. So chapter 5, feasibility of operational employment. The experiments of the 1970s should more than convince you of Psi's potential military uses. But why did Charles Honorton say in 1984 that Psi has not reached the application stage? Probably because to use Psi capabilities operationally requires 1. The ability to control Psi so it can be repeated on demand. 2. The ability to teach it and learn it. 3. The ability to practice it, gain confidence, improve our understanding, and increase reliability. How close are we to satisfying these requirements? Next chapter, controllability. Psi is frequently criticized because it is so unpredictable. Psychics are not always successful, experiments are hard to replicate, and therefore use upon demand is unreliable. But is that reason to exclude it altogether? We see it used mainly in situations where there are no other alternatives. That's an interesting phrase there, that last sentence. The Defense Department used psychics in an attempt to find General Dozier, kidnapped by the Italian Red Brigades in January 1982. All attempts were unsuccessful and unrelated to his eventual rescue. But if 100% reliability is required, then no technique used today is acceptable either. A CIA-commissioned independent evaluation following Project Scannet concluded manifestations of extrasensory perception were sufficiently sharp and clear-cut to justify serious considerations of possible applications. However, it cautioned that existing ignorance of the basis of paranormal phenomena together with the capricious and unreliable nature of the channel dictate that information derived from this source can never stand alone and must be used with caution. Who said never say never? Psi could be routinely used to complement other systems we have, and as a last resort, when and where appropriate. Remember, a 1983 Congressional Research Service report says, dowsing for water, oil, and other minerals is an established practice around the world. Similarly, other professionals are using Psi functioning to assist them in their businesses. Police seek help identifying clues and suspects in criminal investigations. Mr. Price frequently used his talents as police commissioner of Burbank, California. Mr. Price frequently used his talents as police Okay, so one of their noted psychics was a commissioner in Burbank, California. A police commissioner at that. Healthcare specialists utilize Psi techniques for determining and improving patients' health. Companies and individual property owners use dowsers to locate water for drilling wells. But where do you find people like the Delphi Oracle or Mr. Price? Next chapter, learnability. After years of study, Targ says, we are certain that psychic abilities are a totally normal aspect of human awareness, and that you can learn to develop this potential sanely and rationally. Anyone who decides for himself that it is safe to experience paranormal functioning can learn to do so. The key to learning appears to be acceptance and support rather than skepticism and criticism. Since Western society has repressed these psychic abilities, most people experiencing Psi also tend to ignore the potential and usefulness. We have a pull quote here. In our society, a person who is beginning to experience emergent psychic abilities, or who is interested in doing so, has almost nowhere to turn for guidance. They can admit their interests and risk being branded as social deviants, or they can deny their interest in psychic functioning and thereby become alienated from what might be an important aspect of their own lives and experiences. However, as people hear more about these capabilities and realize psi functioning is a normal experience, there is a greater sharing and exchange of personal experiences. People from all walks of life are attending personal awareness and assertiveness seminars to learn how to take control of their lives. Instructor Robert Robbins teaches a seminar entitled Fear into Power, the Firewalk Experience. Is that Tony Robbins? Did that celebrity media person change their name? Is that the self-help guru, Tony Robbins and Robert Robbins? Seminar entitled Fear into Power, the Firewalk Experience, where hundreds of people learn to walk barefoot over hot coals in a 4-hour seminar. Their whole concept is that mind and will can control the world. Norman Cousins, an adjunct professor at the UCLA School of Medicine, has written 2 books on the subject of self-healing. He is certain that the mind has the power to affect physical processes. In Russia, professional mineralogists and geologists are taught dowsing at Tomsk Polytechnical Institute. Similarly, the U.S. National Dowsing Association teaches classes at annual conferences to anyone who is interested. After using many untrained individuals in remote viewing experiments, Targ concludes, the best scientific research suggests that the capacity for developing genuine psychic abilities lies latent in many, or perhaps most people. In 1984, the U.S. Army initiated a 2-year study to evaluate the potential of certain unconventional methods to enhance human performance. The study recently concluded, quote, sleep learning, mental imaging, and accelerated learning programs are among the unconventional techniques which may improve soldier performance. However, the committee rejected parapsychological techniques such as extrasensory perception and psychokinesis as scientifically unsupportable. Note this study rejects psi because it is not scientifically supportable. But does it work? During Vietnam, the Marine Corps trained a platoon of dowsers to locate hidden tunnels and weapons caches in Corps near Hue. They were withdrawn after 5 months because the successful use of dowsing appeared to require special skills that cannot be taught to the average Marine. The commander of the Training and Development Command did not discredit dowsing, but merely pointed out it is a special skill his Marines hadn't mastered. Next chapter, practice. Given that psi can be controlled, taught, and learned, it probably requires more than a 4-hour short course for use operationally. Many skills require specialization, long-term training, and extensive practice to master. The experienced psi practitioners of today are those people who have spent years developing their individual talents. With those years of experience come the increased confidence of how to use their talents. Like other normal skills, practice and training improve performance, understanding, and reliability. And those who have learned the most psi are best suited to begin training a new vanguard to carry on and improve their skills. But in the hostile environment of Western society, the history of psi has been one of independent research and independent findings, held closely to prevent the scorn of organized science and society. Consequently, we continue to lose the knowledge of experience of past masters rather than building on their understanding to improve our own. The one historic thread of commonality is a belief that psi exists and can offer much more for the future of mankind. In 1983, Targ said that our understanding has reached the point where we can seriously consider transferring the remote viewing technology from laboratory research to real-world applications. Are we ready? There are 3 avenues that parapsychologists have long since recognized as possible routes to general acceptance of psi. 1. Through experiments which produce psi upon demand in laboratories so skeptics are convinced that all conditions are correctly controlled. 2. Through mainstream sciences acceptance of new theories which explain psi phenomena. 3. Through finding practical applications that work, regardless of limited understanding. Researchers have traditionally tried to use Method 1 to convince the scientific community, but prevailing concepts reign supreme. Method 2 is also directly dependent on the scientific community and is very unlikely given the limited understanding of psi today. That is why psi practitioners and many researchers have gone to Method 3 in the 1980s. Through practical application, they can develop their skills, leaving prevailing concepts behind, along with the scientific community. Many researchers point to how the scientific community was the last to accept hypnotism. So too, researchers feel psi will gain acceptance from society long before the scientific community comes to grips with it. Operational use of psi is up to the user. King Croesus was content after one test to use the Delphi Oracle. World-famous psychic Edgar Cayce advised General John Pershing and accompanied him on European missions. Even General Patton used the psi talents of a water dowser while in North Africa. Neither of those things I actually knew. I mean, let me just read that again. World-famous psychic, that's the Edgar Cayce, that is. That's a library. That's a pretty big library and campus in Virginia. Advised General John Pershing and accompanied him on European missions. And then this is, I didn't even know about this, not that I should have, but even General Patton used the psi talents of a water dowser while in North Africa. More recently, according to Barbara Honegger, who worked 3 years in the White House Office of Policy Development for the Reagan administration, quote, parapsychology played a major role in one of the administration's most controversial defense decisions, abandoning the Carter administration's shell game deployment of the MX missile. In other words, U.S. studies show Soviet psychics could beat the shell game and pinpoint the missiles. These examples show how operational use depends equally on someone taking the risk to try unorthodox techniques. Congressman Charlie Rose, the DNC, is a respected long-term congressman and member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence. He takes psychic weapons seriously, but in 1984 didn't think we had the technology to build them. So let me just pause here since this is in November 2019, where currently the House Select Committee on Intelligence is running a shell game on TV. Congressman Charlie Rose, there's a quote of him in Wikipedia saying he was single-handedly responsible for bringing technology into the White House. He was always the first person to usher in new methods of doing things. He takes psychic weapons seriously, but in 1984 didn't think we had the technology to build them. Quote, the congressman's personal experience has convinced him such breakthroughs are on the horizon. He has attended classified demonstrations of remote viewing arranged by the CIA. Says Rose, I've seen some incredible examples of remote viewing, so much so that I think we ought to pay close attention to developments in this field, and especially to what the Soviets are doing. If they develop a capacity to have people mentally view secret centers within this country, we could come to the point where we didn't have any secrets. Well, I mean, idealistically, right? Isn't that where we all want to be? Isn't that the whole point of globalization and federation? And, what are you truly defending against if you're trying to homogenize the world in the first place? Looks like we're on the last paragraph here. It's a small paragraph. Bearden thinks those breakthroughs have occurred. He has documented evidence that the Soviets are beyond the speculation and research stages and have developed psi weapon systems ready to strike. With the threat so near, why are we so unprepared? All right, and that's going to end this chapter here. This is chapter 5, Feasibility of Operational Employment. You can see the declassified number up here if you just want to go ahead and not listen to me stumble over words. And, I have to keep a lower volume sometimes when I do these recordings, so when I'm not able to really talk at my normal, natural pace, I actually stumble more, which includes speed reading, which I'm used to doing, and that sort of translates in how I speak as well. But I'm trying to keep a low key on this, and also keep my voice from being too exacerbated or inflecting or attenuating emotions in people. All right, have a good night.